Mr. Weir, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Madam Minister, you said, and I quote, "Canadians can expect an announcement on the future of Canada Post Corporation in the not-too-distant future," end quote. As I'm sure you're aware, our committee pulled out all the stops to present our report on the future of Canada Post in December of last year because the government said it wanted to respond in the spring of this year. We're now approaching the end of the year, so I'm wondering if you can commit that the government will respond to our report on Canada Post before Parliament adjourns for Christmas.
I can make that commitment, yes.
Okay, so the not-too-distant future means
really
like the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Before Christmas.
Okay, well, thanks very much for clarifying that. Regarding the Phoenix Working Group, you said, and again I quote, "The working group of ministers created by the Prime Minister in April is ensuring that we make a whole-of-government approach," end quote. Now, you also talked about a pan-government approach. I'm wondering what that means and what is the working group actually doing?
Well, what the working group provides, in my opinion, is a very targeted, calculated reminder every week we meet to every minister around that table and as a result every minister at Cabinet that this is the responsibility of every minister to make sure that their people are paid on time. And so we ask deputies for updates on what they're doing in their departments, what kind of resources they could be committing to this. Ministers are expected to know numbers, in terms of what their department is looking at, whether their numbers are headed in the right direction, if they're not, why. So it does add a level of accountability and awareness that is significant, I would say.
Okay, and do you feel that all the ministers on that working group are responsible for Phoenix, or do you take personal responsibility for the file?
Oh, 100%. It's on me. My work and my mandate letter clearly states that this is my number one priority, and I feel lucky to have the colleagues that I have around the table who are assisting in that regard, led by Minister Goodell. But the oversight provided by that committee ensures a whole of government piece, but is ultimately the buck stops at me to get this thing resolved.
Okay, thanks. And I'd like to reinforce something that Mr. McCauley said about the frustration that we have as MPs in not having tools to help constituents with Phoenix problems. If someone comes into our offices and needs help with employment insurance or immigration, there are hotlines that we or our staff can call to get answers. There's nothing like that in place for Phoenix. In an adjournment debate with the parliamentary secretary back in March, I suggested establishing an MP hotline for Phoenix. So I just want to clarify when that's going to happen and that it's going to be comparable to the hotlines that we have for immigration and EI.
Yeah, and you and I had that conversation as well. I guess, to my mind, it's very cleverly and calculatingly using resources to the best. Every resource we pull off the backlog is not addressing the backlog, and so this idea has been discussed in my tenure a couple of times, and we need to methodically deal with the backlog using the priorities and the lenses we've created. So I completely agree that we need to have a stronger line of communication. In what form that will be, I'm not prepared to say, whether it will be an actual hotline, what kind of resources we'll dedicate. I have to look at options. I can commit, as I did, to within a couple of weeks making sure there's clear communication lines, but I can't tell you what that'll look like.
I guess the perspective I would offer is that we have 338 constituency offices across the country that could be used as points of contact to help address the most problematic Phoenix cases. That's the logic the government's taken with immigration and EI. We don't hear the argument that, well, people shouldn't be able to jump the EI queue by going to their MP office. We say the role of MPs is to serve constituents and they need to have access to get answers, and I'm really not understanding why the same logic wouldn't apply to Phoenix.
I do find that particularly compelling, and I will look into it. I guess I'm just mindful of every resource we take off of one thing and being clear, but I definitely will commit to looking into that.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of how much the government is prepared to spend on fixing Phoenix?
Well, we have to spend wisely, and to date, depending on where you start the math, we could include the initial 309,000. But what our government has put in is the 143 this spring, $50 million last year on the satellite offices, and we've reinvested the $70 million that was booked in saving over 3 years. So already you're up at, say, $600 million, and more money will need to be spent. I'm not prepared to give you an exact number, because as we face each of these challenges, the numbers will change. But at the end of the day, people need to be paid, and we are going to pay what it takes to get them paid. The more interesting conversation will be around investments in stabilizing the current system and investments in perhaps exploring alternatives.
Okay, so it sounds like between the original cost of Phoenix and the money that's been put into fixing it so far, we're pushing $1 billion. I appreciate you're not prepared to give a final number, but can you tell us at what point and on what basis your government will update us on the ongoing tally for Phoenix?
Absolutely. So what I've just given you is the math to date. So 309 plus 143 plus 50 plus 3 times 210. And as we make further investments, we will immediately advise. We will make that public. Absolutely.
Okay. In the same vein, and one of the troubling findings from the Auditor General's report was that there were, quote, no comprehensive governance and oversight structures, end quote, in place to deal with Phoenix. How would you respond to that concern?
So in terms of governance, sorry, I was distracted by the water. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I mean, the Auditor General said, and I'm quoting, there was no comprehensive governance and oversight structures set up. So
at the go live of Phoenix, I think that's a very fair assessment. I think that we've learned that we as a small G government, the government before or after needs a whole of government approach with governance mechanisms, that include ultimate accountability and oversight in one place.
And I guess speaking of timing, I would like to ask about the timeline for fixing Phoenix. The Auditor General suggests that it will take years. Do you find that acceptable?
Well, certainly not acceptable that it would take years. Again, I don't mean to quibble, but the definition of fixing is one that we struggle with a lot. So if by fixing you mean at what point will we have a stable system that pays everybody on time and accurately, it will not take years. If by fixing do we have a state-of-the-art integrated HR to pay process, policy system, that will take multiple years, yes.
Okay, so in terms of the first objective of having a system that pays people properly and on time, when will the government achieve it?
Well, again, I hesitate because our dates have been wrong in the past, but I'm hopeful that you'll see by the end of 2018.
By the end of 2018? Okay, and you mentioned earlier that you take personal responsibility for Phoenix. If that goal is not achieved by the end of 2018, would you resign as Minister of Public Services and Procurement?
Wow, this is an interesting way to end this discussion, but I would hope that if that goal wasn't achievable, it won't come as a surprise by the end of 2018, so I would be forthright and honest and amend my estimation as it becomes apparent that goal can't be met.
Okay, and you said something about realigning the IBM contract. It seems that IBM keeps getting paid more money to help fix a system that they set up. Do you think that's appropriate? Do you think there's a way of better contracting in the future to avoid these problems?
Well, absolutely, in terms of, as I spoke briefly about, focusing more on outcomes and tasks. But I think we need to be very clear about the scope of the work that IBM was contracted to do. It was not contracted to provide the robust system I'm suggesting it should have been contracted to do, and Les can give us more details. But we are holding IBM to the terms of their contract.
And just in terms of updating the way we work with IBM, earlier this year we did update the contract on the technical side to move to a managed service approach, whereby we actually are giving them certain tasks with expected outcomes to deliver, as opposed to piecemeal, as had been the modular approach as had been done in the past. And we are now looking at the functional side, replicating that so that we can give more risk to IBM and for them to help manage the pay system more efficiently.
Thank you.